It's been 11 years since I last played a Mega Man game, and wow, that's a long time. Mega Man 9 and 10 were 8 years ago, but I wasn't into the whole retro nostalgia thing, since I grew up with the originals. And Mega Man at its core has a pretty simple formula, but I think it survived for so long because it kept experimenting with it for better or worse. So those games felt more like a swan song to me than anything else. But my feelings on that aside, how does a new game hold up in this day and age? Does it do something to feel new, or is it another last hurrah? Well, I can say that it feels and looks fantastic. It really captures that core challenge of a Mega Man game, but after so long, well, this is like a lightning strike, and I don't know if we'll see it again. Now, the first thing I do when playing a new game is actually check the options screen, so let's check that out first. I'm playing this on PC, so there's actually a separate PC settings category here, but it mostly consists of making sure your window is working right. There is a borderless window option, and in actual fact the game started borderless by default, but there isn't anything to adjust the graphics. And that's okay, I'm fine with that. There isn't a lot of 3D, so the hardware requirements are low. But of what there is, it's all cel-shaded and blends in very well with the environment. Changing anything would probably make it less seamless. Moving on to controls, this is where it really gets interesting. At its core, you only needed 2 or 3 buttons to play Mega Man. You jump, shoot, and pause the game, but there are a ton of new utilities here that finally give a use to all of those extra buttons you have now on the controller. There's a dedicated rush coil and rush jet button now, and they aren't bound by default, but there's also a slide button and an actual auto-fire button. The slide button is great for those coming from the other Mega Man series, and an auto-fire is great for just not breaking your controller anymore. You can also use the right stick to switch your weapons now. Now, one last thing in the options that I'd like to note is that I ended up turning up the music volume a little bit. There's something about the sound balance in this game that drowns it out, so... Oh, and you can pick your voice acting in the language options. Starting a new game though, the first thing you have to do is pick your difficulty, and I think there's finally something for everyone here. Newcomer is very generous. You have infinite lives, infinite items, extra health, damage. If you've never played a game before, this is a great way to just avoid any frustration and have fun. Superhero, though, is the complete opposite and removes every item from the game. Casual is a nice middle ground. It only adds a couple of extra lives, hit points and checkpoints, so I think it's good for those who know how to play these games, but don't really want to waste too much time dying and restarting too often. And normal is exactly what it implies. It's a difficult game and was designed that way. So let's get into it. Now, one thing that becomes clear quite quickly is that the game is all about keeping you in control of your character as much as possible. After a cutscene, you're asked if you want a tutorial, but there's no lengthy introduction stage or someone slowly explaining each of your abilities. You're just dropped straight into a training room and you can go nuts. The controls are all listed in the corner and it feels a lot like a playable version of your instruction booklet. There's nothing superfluous here, it's just a short list of what you need to know and a place to try it all out. And this actually happens every single time you finish a level and get a new weapon. And you can also just go to the pause menu and play around whenever you want. Onto the stage selection, there's actually a subtle difference here compared to previous titles, and it's that your cursor doesn't start in the middle of the screen. Mega Man games are known for being non-linear. You're free to choose where to start. But a major flaw in that was that you couldn't have a difficulty curve. All of the stages had to be equally easy or difficult, since every stage had to teach you the basics. Here though, the cursor starts on Block Man, and that's a subtle hint that the stage is fairly easy and doesn't ramp up in difficulty very much. Fierce Man and Acid Man are good choices after that, but the bottom stages ramp up in difficulty quite severely after you get past the first area. Now, since Block Man was in the trailers and demo, I'll just pick this one first. Now, there was a hint of it in the training room, but playing this game, it's as if it never left. The movement might not look completely smooth, but it's actually very responsive. There's no input lag as far as I can tell, and when you want something done, it happens right away. I mean, these games have always been about moving around, and jumping and shooting with as much precision as you can have. So having any animation like startups, in-betweens and whatnot, that just makes the game go slower. In many of the later games actually, like Mega Man 8 and the second half of the X series, this happened quite a lot, and led to a lot of problems where, even though you reacted and pressed a button right in the nick of time, your character won't do the same. The two new abilities feel like great crutches in this regard as well. I mean, like it or not, this has been a long time for me, so my reaction time can't always keep up, and the speed gear is great at compensating that. The game runs at 60 frames per second and can move very fast, so slowing down time is great for letting you see what you can actually do. And you'd be surprised at how much you can do. A lot of speedrun tricks rely on being frame perfect, and this puts that feeling into your hand with much less luck or reflexes. The power gear increases your attack power, and while it does make your normal weapon a little more powerful, it gets pretty ridiculous when you use it to charge up the weapons you get from the bosses. Now, they all have their tactical uses, like shooting in a specific direction or exploiting an elemental weakness, but when powered up, some of these just outright clear the entire screen, and that feels pretty awesome if I say so myself. And much like the Rush Coil and Rush Jet, these are on dedicated buttons. While the speed gear gives you more time to react, you can also just react more quickly. I find myself actually remembering to use Rush more often, and you can completely avoid those moments where you have to pause the game in the middle of something really important. And then after that you unpause and maybe you forgot what was going on. You know what I'm getting at, right? You were always being interrupted. Everything that I really like here is all about keeping your experience for the stage as a whole, and always having what you need when you need it. And speaking of experiences, these stages are so beautiful. The stage layouts themselves are challenging and all precisely measured, but it's all in this richly detailed hand-painted style. I actually have trouble figuring out if this is 3D or not, because the texture resolutions are just so high. All of the stages have the right contrast between the foreground and background, so you always know where to go, although there were a few iffy spots. While half the backgrounds aren't too interesting and only build on the stage's theme, there are also several places where there are these giant matte paintings that make everything feel huge. It's not something you'll be distracted by, of course, since they do darken it a bit to make the stages pop out, but I wouldn't mind having some of these as a wallpaper or a poster on my wall. Overall, the art does what it does best, and it takes all of the Mega Man art and brings it to life. It's all in high definition without anything that's pixelated or low res. And I have to say that the art style here really just clicks with me. The art director for this game was actually the artist for the Mega Man Battle Network series. And for those who don't know, Battle Network was a modern reinterpretation of the setting and all the characters in this Mega Man universe. So it feels like everything has come full circle. And Battle Network was also an RPG, and not a side-scrolling platformer, and I believe that much of the team who worked on it were leading Mega Man 11, which makes the whole thing doubly impressive. All in all, there's so many more inconveniences and everything being in high resolution. This is probably the best Mega Man game I've played, but it's also the only Mega Man game I've played in recent memory. I mean, back then, there was a game every single year, and maybe that's why it burned out and tried to remix the NES games in the end. And while this was like riding a bike, it does feel like the world has moved on and forgotten about this series. All of the fan sites are gone or barely functional, and people have made other platformers in the meantime. So, does the Mega Man series have a place now? Well, I don't know, since I'd moved on from it as well. But I can say that it's a great game, and it manages to bring back all the things that I fondly remember, placing it in a modern package. And that's all there is.